Davidson. I'm Brett Davidson. I'm the lead for narrative field building at Iris. And I've long been aware of the global messaging program that Anat and other people have put together. And so when Iris had a chance to provide some scholarships for members of the Confluence community to attend, we really wanted to do that because we thought it was really valuable. So many of the folks who are talking today applied and were able to get a scholarship to join the global um, messaging program. And so really we wanted to hear back from them and see how it went and what they learned and what it's all about. We wanted to share this with the Confluence community. So I'm very excited to hear what people have learned and what's happening kind of after the program. So I want to hand over to Anat Shenkarostorio, who leads it, and Anat will take it over from here on. Just to ask folks also just to keep yourself muted while you're not speaking or if you're not a presenter, because we have this in meeting mode so that people can ask questions afterwards, not in webinar mode. So please just make sure to keep yourself muted. Thanks so much.
All right. Um, Thank you everybody for being here. We're super excited for you to hear from four of our uh, fellows. That's really the meat of the program. But before they speak, I'm just going to give you a super quick overview of what it is that happened before they finished their project. This is some lawyer talk that the lawyers say I should tell you. The presentation is off the record, close to the press. Don't record it yourselves. Don't copy the slides. Don't do the AI creepiness. Supposedly, we're going to do some stuff to you if you do that creepiness. And that's what the lawyers said should be on the slide. So now I did that. So this is our third cohort. Every year, as everyone who's done the course can attest, I say that I'm never doing this again. I clearly am a person of my word. Um, but then I keep doing it, or we keep doing it. We first did this in 2019 across Australia, the US, and the UK. We had some EU folks. In 2022, Australia was in full lockdown. And so we were US, UK with some other folks from different places mixed in. And last year, thanks to the extraordinary generosity and leadership of Iris, we were able to expand out and have folks from more different countries, including four of the folks that you will hear from today. The way that the course works is that it's arguably pretty intense. And we try to be pretty upfront about how intense it is. It begins with an in-person retreat. Well, it begins before that with applications and us asking questions around narrative and what it is people are actually looking to do to ensure that the course is actually going to be a fit between what it is they want and what it is they will be learning, because obviously we don't want anyone in the wrong place and feeling like, whoops, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. The course has a very robust syllabus, which we update each time anew. These are just some screenshots from the syllabus of what folks need to read before, for example, before the opening retreat on the upper right, and just at a random week. We then do an opening retreat in person where we do a lot of content. The folks in the cohort meet each other. In 25, our opening retreat was in Ireland at a convent that had all of its own joys and very interesting food. Very interesting food. And then over the course of the intervening weeks, we meet online. We manage the time zone difference by doing two different webinars because we have folks basically in all the time zones. And then we meet again for a closing retreat. In 2025, that closing retreat was outside of Melbourne in Australia in sort of wine country at a very lovely retreat center. The course is predicated on the idea, as I often like to joke, that words mean things. And more specifically, I mean that language instantiates in our brain and actually shapes cognition. And the kinds of messages that we use, yes, in words, but also in visuals, shape how people understand our issues, our advocacy, our campaigns, and how they come to judgments. And so we focus really, really deeply on message We touch on other aspects of communication like dissemination, like campaign creation. We do go through a pretty robust module on research, how to do it, how to understand it, how to recreate it on the cheap. But really, the emphasis and focus is on words and meaning. One of the modules we go through is on framing. Framing is a overused and abused word. It just simply references the fact that words occur in context. And so something as simple as a single word can evoke a set of associated meanings. You will hear some of that in folks' presentations. We also go through the tried and true things not to do. Top of that list is negation. I think that this is something with which folks on this call will be familiar. Just our unrelenting desire to accidentally feed what the opposition is saying by saying X is not Y. And again, as you've probably heard, what we know is that when you say my parents are not child abusers, you are basically saying parents, child abusers. When you are saying immigrants are not criminals, you are saying immigrants, criminals. And this instinct to sort of always be in negation, we find over and over again, robs us of airtime to tell our own story. So we don't just raise this for people. The way that the course differs from just hearing a seminar is that we do exercises and we actually train folks within the course how to rewrite and actually how to approach their own sentences, others' sentences, and fix these things, not just notice them. We also spend lots of time, and you'll probably hear about this today, on the progressive tendency to do everything, or at least a lot of things, in the passive voice. This is where seemingly problems come from the ether or perhaps zombies. Democracy is eroding, harms are increasing, homes were lost. As a person who loses things frequently, I can assure you I have never misplaced my house. For folks joining us from the US, you may have been hearing over the last couple of days how many jobs were lost. I am not sure exactly how you lose a job, feels pretty hard to misplace. When we do not establish at the outset that a problem is person made, it becomes difficult for our audiences to believe it can be person fixed. So, again, in the course, people actually practice fixing these things, not just noticing them. We spend quite a bit of quality time. I know this is everybody's favorite module. I don't know if they're going to tell you during their presentations that this is their favorite module, but on conceptual metaphors. Conceptual metaphors probably, I think, for a lot of people, the hardest part of the course. But this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of the way that we unconsciously convey communications. And what happens, for example, when we say things to people like the economy is healthy or it's unhealthy, or we talk about having a recovery bill, all of which emerge from a personification, from a metaphor that likens the economy to a human body, and sort of what that does to people's understanding of the economy and their desire and preferences for, let's say, intervention on the part of government in order to increase prosperity and equality. So we spend a lot of time here, and you'll hear some of that today. I will leave off before I turn over to the stars of the show, the headliners, on an example of a project that came out of the course. So folks do an opening retreat, they learn a bunch of stuff, they hang out, they eat really weird food in a convent, not always. Then they meet weekly to do different modules, they do readings, they do assignments. Doesn't this sound like a fun time? And then they have to do a final project, which really endears them to us. This is what makes them love us, is that they have to do a final project. Um, and in that final project, they have to conduct their own original analysis on a topic of their choice that's germane to their own work. We make them pick that topic at the opening retreat, so they have the entire course to work on it. Of course, none of them procrastinate and just do it at the last minute. They all have it done super early. How much of this sounds true to you? And some folks over the course of the course produce, go on to take that language analysis and produce more with it. So this is an example from the 2019 cohort. We had a participant who is an Aboriginal Australian leader and really decided to embrace things. And after she was done with the GMP, she created an entire messaging course just for First Nations leaders in Australia. And we guest taught, we helped structure it, and we did a research project, which we helped them with, that ended up in this messaging guide, which we can share with you, called Passing the Message Stick. And in creating Passing the Message Stick, they did testing. And here is just an example of that testing. So, as part of the language analysis, there was a hypothesis that deficit language, which is very commonplace in advocacy, deficit language is when, in an earnest effort to make people understand just how challenging and difficult things are, we really underscore and emphasize, to the exclusion of everything else, the badnesses. So we fielded a forced choice question in two different ways. The first way was, arguably, Aboriginal people have shown resilience and strength in the face of unfair treatment and racist government policies for the last 230 years. So, shown resilience and strength, that is asset-based messaging. And arguably, Aboriginal people have been the victims of unfair treatment and racist government policies for the last 230 years. You can see that the sentence ends the same way in both cases, but that yellow part is different. Half the sample gets A, half the sample gets B, and we ask which sounds most right. Either we need more Aboriginal people making policy decisions, or we need our government to make fairer policies. And probably not shocked to hear that the people who are exposed to the B condition are much less likely to give us the answer that we desire, because of course a message is only as good as what it accomplishes, which is we need more Aboriginal people making policy decisions. When we speak only in deficit, it reinforces this idea that Aboriginal people, in this case, maybe shouldn't be in charge of themselves because they are so much the subject of harms and horrors. As part of this, just to round out this example, these are examples of what the messaging was like in among First Nations people prior to the GMP, prior to this person completing the analysis, prior to then making an entire messaging course for First Nations participants in Australia, and then doing the research. So this is the before and after shot. This is before. So you can see here every year, billions of us talking about taxpayer dollars, talking about the impacts of climate change, can't just stand by, watch this devastation happen. So lots of passive voice, land rights, not mining rights, a classic negation. This is all before. And then after the GMP and the subsequent steps, this was how the messaging has shifted. And I'm very, very proud and happy to say for them, they have won a series of pretty landmark things, including right of first refusal, the ability to block multiple mining sites, and also a real shift away from what is traditionally called Australia Day, which is to become Invasion Day, and actually celebrated or mourned or marked, I should say marked, as a day of resiliency. Australia Day being, I guess, the US analogy would be Columbus Day. So very much a day of sort of shrimps on the Barbie for the average Australian, but very much sadness and grief for the First Nations community. And so that shift is very much underway. So here's an example of where they landed. This is the after.
We are seeing and our movement is growing. Mining giants are paying politicians to stand in our way, but what we have that they don't is each other. Together, we can change the course of history. It's time for much more than climate action. It's time for climate justice. It's time for everyone, everywhere, to stand up. We are the first scientists, the oldest continuing culture. We've defended Mother Earth for thousands of generations. We've survived every shitstorm that's been thrown at us. We are First Nations. We are trailblazing the path out of this crisis. We know what to do. It's time for you to follow our lead, and together we can build a future worth fighting for.
So with that, the stars of the show. We're going to hear from a series of 4 different participants, and we're going to begin with the fantastic Gabi Juns, who is going to talk to us about her project from Brazil. I will stop sharing and kick it over to you, Gabi.
Thank you. So I'm gonna share my screen.
Great.
All right, now you're gonna see yourselves, pessoal. I just can't. Wait. My computer didn't help here.
Are you having challenges?
Okay, here I am. Okay, it's a full screen, right? Okay.
Go.
My project was about like how we talk about pregnancy or how we perceive pregnancy in Brazil. And I put in abortion because that's what we work with here, like in Lamparina, the organization part. So a little bit of context, abortion is illegal in Brazil, except in three cases, like impregnation by rape or risk of death to the mother, or if you have an encephalic fetus, which is, we have lots of cases with Zika virus here. There is a project of the decriminalization that's being analyzed in the Supreme Court since 2023. And though we have a mostly liberal court, the judges are very afraid of like telling their opinion publicly. Just two of them have cast their votes, and they did it like by the last day before they retired. So it was the last act of each of them, and they cast the vote and left. And the other judges are there, like having to fight Bolsonaro, which is like our Trump in Brazil, or other things to protect democracy or other stuff that Supreme Court have to fight. And this matter is like in a drawer and openly waiting for public opinion to be more supportive of their votes. Our work at Lamparina is mainly focused on moving flexibles by demonstrating there is a public consensus for the decriminalization. So we do that by adding new voices to the public debate and inspiring our base to change their communication, like other organizations like us, to change their communication to be more persuadable to flexibles, for example. My question would be, how do Brazilians perceive abortion? And through mentoring, Anat convinced me to actually ask about pregnancy, which changed everything because we kind of already know, like at least in the field of those who fight for legal abortion in Brazil, we know how abortion is perceived and it's very badly. So looking for something that would excite me was more productive. So I looked at how people of like our field talked about it, allies, advocacy organizations. I look at the opposition, like congressmen, the church, the Catholic Church mainly. I looked at Supreme Court statements as it's there and how do they talk about it. On TikTok videos, that was the only social media I looked, and soap operas, because that's a huge piece of culture in Brazil. I was expecting to find memes such as like, I'm 39 and still afraid of getting pregnant in my adolescence, which is like super true. I'm 40 now and still afraid of it. But the reality is harder. So I found pregnancy being talked as if it was a secret that we have to hide, tell, or we reveal. I'll talk further about these findings. I found a lot about teen pregnancy, and it's put mainly as a burden or a threat we must avoid or combat. And third, and most interesting part for me was that I found out about the invisibility of the genitors. So once they get pregnant, they become like most of the times I'm gonna use language here in a way that is not very appropriate because, like we know, women get pregnant, but also trans men get pregnant, and different people who have an uterus can get pregnant. But I will mainly use mother sometimes. So once they're pregnant, like the mother, they become a vessel or a machine, God's orchard. I saw many language examples doing that, or just like the pregnant, which is a Portuguese language thing. I will explain. And the other one responsible for the pregnancy are 100% invisible. Let's go to pregnancy as a secret that we hide, we find out about, or we reveal to our parents. That's mainly how people talk about it on TikTok and in the soap operas, which are like the two more cultural pieces of communication I studied. Like the other parts are much more in the political field. These are like more in the pop culture field. So here are some examples. It's a soap opera line. Your mother had a fling with a man and a month later found out she was pregnant. Or this TikTok user says, I'm pregnant and haven't told anyone yet, so I'm keeping the secret. And this thing that I found so many videos starting the same way, just sometimes just changing the age. It's like, and my 15-year-old daughter hid her pregnancy, and then it tells like a story of how she got to hide her pregnancy until she had birth. I don't know, it's something I really would like to look up later. The other point is teen pregnancy as a threat. I have to tell you that like it's not my opinion here that like if teen pregnancy is a threat or not, and you're gonna find things about child pregnancy here. I'm just analyzing the language. So mostly allies and opposition, like everyone is a consensus, talk about it as a problem, a disease, or a burden we have. So the government launched its new project to combat teen pregnancy. It's an ally organization talking about it. The campaign and pregnancy prevention are under our responsibility. So we're preventing like a disease here. All of society should demand from the deputies a commitment to the elimination of child pregnancy. In ally organization too. And now here comes my favorite part, which is like the religious framing, which shouldn't be a surprise for me because I live in Brazil that is very conservative, but it was because I thought it was passed in the 90s, and that's why this presentation looks so colorful because I thought like it was a 90s idea. So we have invisible biological parents or the genitors. And it comes mainly from religious framing because I don't know if you know this story that is in the Bible, but Mary got pregnant she had a son of God, which is not a real person, a living person. So in Hail Mary, we have the sentence that is blessed is the fruit of thy womb. And to talk about we don't talk about like Mary, a pregnant person, we talk about her womb, as if there wasn't a person there. So here are some examples with how we still use that nowadays. It's not just in the Bible. We have like this opposition doctor talking in Congress about, and he says, from now on, it is once again possible to kill babies in the womb through fetal assistance. Or this thing here, like all of society should demand from the deputies of their states a commitment to the elimination of child pregnancy. And it's child pregnancy as we're not talking about a pregnant child, we're talking about an index. And it's an ally organization talking about it. And here, one day in the life of our favorite little pregnant, it's a TikTok video saying, like, showing a girl at school that is pregnant, and like she wakes up and then she does that and she does that. And it's like one day in the life of our favorite little pregnant. And this is something I really want to explore because we don't say in Portuguese, we are allowed to say the pregnant instead of like the pregnant woman or the pregnant child. So I'm like, here is a little bit of Portuguese class for you guys, but it's like a mulher grávida is the pregnant woman, a criança grávida, the pregnant child, o homem grávido, the pregnant man. And then in Portuguese, we're allowed to say a grávida, the pregnant. And I figured out that that's a huge way of hiding the person. Once you get pregnant, you're suddenly a grávida in everywhere you are. We have situations like even in our groups of friends saying, so what does the pregnant uh, think about this? You know, like just jokes and like very normal. Okay. So the other part, that's the invisibility of the other part in of the person responsible in the pregnancy. And it's also coming from the Bible. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. So you will conceive all by yourself. As if pregnancy wasn't the result of something done by two people. And in the Bible case, it really wasn't. So, and the opposite, we have this opposition deputy saying it doesn't matter the age, a 12-year-old child that has an already advanced pregnancy can't have an abortion. Or the majority of the teenagers, when they arrive pregnant to the consult, it's an opposite senator, like they arrive pregnant. At the same teenagers who are under a threat with pregnancy, right? So me showing up pregnant, show up pregnant within 2 months of dating. It's like also a TikTok video like, oh, me showing up pregnant within 2 months of dating. And what are the problems then? That I realized that like when we have this invisible pregnant person, it is very helpful to the narratives for fetal personhood framing. Like we are talking about doing it to babies over 5 months inside the womb. So we're just talking about the fetus, the babies that are inside of a womb, not a person who has rights or who has the risk of death or anything that's happening to this person in their life that they want to make choices. Or and the invisibility of the man mainly, like or the other gender, leads to women blame. So that's how we see it, like in many political situations, like the 17 years old should be to be studying, not getting pregnant, like someone blaming a 17 that she should be studying, not like having fun getting pregnant. So though we talk about it as a threat, we still blame girls and women for getting pregnant. So what can we do? And here are some things we're experimenting here now in Lamparina. So we should stop using child pregnancy and talk it about like child pregnancy as an index and start using impregnated child. And that comes from me learning that
Yeah.
why we say instead of saying like the slave person, we say enslaved person. Am I right in English? I hope so. So it was something done by someone else to this child. So we have to make the invisible visible here. So impregnated child is a way we should start using it. and I'm always putting it in Portuguese because it works. Teen pregnancy and teen impregnated by this ex-person is mainly rape cases, so we should tell who raped the teen. And instead of using, we should stop using the pregnant in Portuguese and start like more talking about who's pregnant. The pregnant person, child, man, woman, couple, which is super understood, like that's how it is in English and other languages, but in Portuguese and in some countries that speak Spanish, we do use the pregnant. Okay, so like with this, in Lamparina, we have talked to partners already about it. We are changing our own communication, but I sent a paper the other day to Erika Hilton, who's a congresswoman fighting for decriminalization of abortion, mainly giving amnesty to people who were arrested for abortion. She's got the bill right now in Congress, and I gave her like the tips to talk about like impregnated and like naming people. I think that's what was and we also brief influencers, and like as soon as we tell influencers, hey, why don't you use this language? People love the language. So it's very interesting to see how people love and adopt it very quickly. That's great. And so questions I still have, and I had it like in December, and I still have because I didn't really work on them since then. How can we also use the metaphor of the secret we have in like soap operas and everything for abortion, maybe because it's like talking about something that's a taboo. Apparently, pregnancy is also taboo. That's why we talk about it as if it was a secret. And we could do the same with abortion instead of like, I don't know, we don't talk about it. So we should like try to talk as a secret then. And as teen pregnancy is perceived as a threat, how can we shift the narrative to protect them, to protect the teen people as we do to kids, instead of blaming them for their pregnancy? So put them more in the place of like protection instead of saying, you did it to yourself. You have to carry this pregnancy and have the child, give it to someone, like this type of thing we experience. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yay! I should have said this earlier, but to state the potentially obvious, some people had to do this course in their non-native language and do all of the analysis in a different language. And fortunately, my Portuñol is decent, so I was able to support Gabi, and also support another person we'll hear from in a moment. But first, so just like super extra kudos for having to do it in Portuguese, do the analysis, and then come up with the English equivalent in order to be able to present to your colleagues and to present again to all of us. So thank you, Gabi. Our next participant, who I hope will come on camera, are you hiding? Speaking of hidden pregnancy, is that what's going on? Coming to us from South Africa is Ntuthuzo Ndzomo, who will walk us through what he figured out in his analysis around language of queerness in a pan-African context, looked across multiple countries within Africa. Yeah, and I will turn it over to you. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Annette. I don't know what's happening with my camera. I'm quite dark, so I think I'll just turn off the video just for the presentation. Yeah. Jay, can you assist me? Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Ntuthuzo Ndzomo. As Annette has stated, I'm from South Africa, and I was part of the 2025 cohort of the conference. Next slide.
Hold on, we're not seeing the slides. At least I am not. I don't know if that's.
Oh, weird. Sorry. I am having screen share difficulties. My goodness. Okay, 1 second.
Do you want to just send it to me? Oh, here we go.
That fix it?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, thanks for that. So for my research question, I wanted to learn how to neutralize opposition's frame that LGBTQI plus inclusion is a foreign threat and destroys the family African unit. So next slide. So I basically asked how are non-traditional family forms and queerness discussed in Southern Africa, looking at Botswana, Namibia, and also South Africa. The next slide. So I basically looked at some of the claims that have been made by the right on African queerness, and these are some of the, the typical terminologies that we tend to hear from time to time. That queer members or LGBTQI plus identities are un-African and Western imported provisions, and also the fact that the push for inclusion is blasphemous and threatens the moral fiber of the nation. Whilst also looking at that, I then decided to also look at what is being said by the left. Next slide. Okay. So also, like, it became quite clear when I also looked at like what is being said from the from the left, that the language in which was being used, that there was a lot of repetition of the opposition's frame to negate it, and legal, academic, and inaccessible language was used all the time by the left. And when I say the left, I'm not excluding myself because I also fall under the left, and because of the content of the course, it basically forced me to go through like a self introspection of what we've been doing as like different organizations that are based in Africa that advocate for the rights of the LGBTQI plus community. And it also became quite clear that this academic language actually reinforces queerness as outside of Africanism because it's not the language we use around Africanness. Next slide. Thank you. Africanism is from the African perspective in a language that is by Africans for Africans. Sorry, there's a spelling error there, but hope people didn't notice it. Next slide. So how do we then go about doing this? So I went further to look at what the world and what we can do in the world to change this narrative. Because what we've noticed is that there's several conferences that are taking place within the African context that are brought to us as a way of actually basically constructing what African family values are, and pushing this message that Africanism is not queerness is not part of Africanism. So we started looking at the fact that we don't actually have existing platforms similar to the conferences that are being held on a monthly basis around Africa by the anti-rights agencies from the West, and that we needed to make sure that we also have similar platforms that are spearheaded by Africans, and there's more inclusion of the African queerness history and the real language used to identify queerness within the African form. Then this brings me to the second part. Next slide. To the one of the major things that came up for me during the global messaging program, where the global messaging program highlighted a growing concern where the narrative surrounding African queerness is increasingly controlled by the Western interests. Over the last 2 years, as I've mentioned, we have seen several conferences that focus on African family values, um, where the speakers, it's evangelist speakers from America. This prompted a critical question during our session in Ireland, where some of the questions which were posed by Annette and also the other, participants of the cohort were about what we are doing as, LGBTQI plus organizations in Africa to counter these outside influences, and whether or not we've attempted to host a summit for Africans by Africans in direct response to this need. And I'm basically proud to announce that then the birth of the African Renaissance Conference was basically, created just from the discussions from the 2025 GMP cohort. Next slide. So basically, the thematic areas of this conference. Firstly, the conference would combine different individuals from different places to celebrate being African, and also to reset the agenda, which has been set by the West for a very long time, and they continue to do so by highlighting the continent's progress in resolving global issues and critically examine the legal landscape. But this would be more than a dialogue to drive narrative change, but a celebration. People will get the opportunity to experience the rich cultural tapestry of the continent through a curated showcase of African music, dance, and visual arts. So, some of the sessions that would take place will be about Africanism is our knowledge reclaimed, Africanism is justice, Africanism is solidarity, Africanism is freedom to thrive, Africanism is inclusion, Africanism is healthcare for all. Africanism is land ecology and climate justice. Africanism is digital sovereignty. And basically, one of the most powerful things about this conference is the fact that it will be approached in a feminist intersectional manner, where after the sessions have taken place, in order to make sure that there's still like a clear way forward, a charter will be formulated that can be used as an advocacy tool for the different participants that would have taken part during this conference, for them to advocate within their own spaces, their own countries, their own governments, etc. And we basically are hoping that it could be done before the 2027 conference, which is meant to happen in South Africa, Cape Town, where we know the likes of Family Watch, and also there's been talks that probably also, the U.S. government might actually send some officials who also basically want to formulate this narrative of what being African is. And we're hoping that it will basically attract more attention than the 2027 conference, which is set for June next year. And that's my presentation. And also, this is the first time that I've finished first, so I'm proud of myself.
Thank you so much, Ntuthuzo. I'm very excited for this conference. One of the core precepts that we teach in the course is if you want people to come to your party, throw a better party. And this sounds like a pretty great party, rather than just being in opposition to these terrible conferences that American evangelicals seem to want to put on. As we discussed, rather than just be in the know, you can't replace something with nothing. And so the idea of replacing something with something really, really wonderful and true and authentic and intersectional and cross issue is super, super exciting to assert what we are for rather than just simply what we are fighting. There's a question for you in the chat that we can take up in Q&A, but the question is, when do you think the conference will happen? So stay tuned. We're going to make him answer that. Our next participant, Valerie, are you going to put yourself on screen? Thank you. Okay, so we get to go back to Latin America. Another person who had to do their analysis in a different language. Luckily, a language I know pretty well, so also able to be supportive. I'm just highlighting this because we want the course to be as inclusive and as supportive as possible. There are some folks who couldn't get help. We have one participant who did it in 3 languages that I could not cover. But I do the best I can. We do the best we can with the languages that we can cover. So Valerie Caamaño Fondeur is going to talk to us about her extraordinary project and work in the Dominican Republic on a new political party and sort of how to present the case for that and make it appealing and attractive. So Valerie, it's all yours.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So, as Anat said, I'm from the Dominican Republic. So by the title, that's just bad. And I'm part of Opción Democrática, which translates to Democratic Option, which is like a new alternative progressive party. This is an exploration of the narratives that we use to talk about ourselves. So the context. Basically, we're challenging the what I like to call the greedy giants. Politics in the DR, as in many countries in the world, is dominated by two major parties, and there's a lot of economic interest behind how politics work. And this has resulted in a lack of trust in the political system, in a lot of clientelism when people go to vote or to support political parties or candidates, and it's dominated by white men, even though it's like a Afro-Caribbean country. As you can see in the picture, these are the presidents for the last 2 decades that still rule the parties they represent. So in that context, Opción Democrática is challenging that. It's a party founded by a woman and is led by a young and diverse leadership. You can see, like, just by the look, how different it is, and is built on voluntary work and on social mobilization. So in that context, I needed to figure out how to motivate people to support the organization, not only by voting, but by canvassing with us, by sharing social media content, by joining the party, going to the activities. And so I decided to explore what narratives, frames, and metaphors we use to talk political participation and the power dynamics in Dominican politics. I analyzed how we, Opción Democrática, talk about it, but also the progressive sector, like NGOs and social movements, and how Dominicans and other politicians talk about it. Based on that, I came across 5 interesting findings, and for each finding, I have a little recommendation. So the first one that I found is that all political parties use a lot of political jargon, which makes us all sound the same. So it makes sense that people cannot really distinguish between a left or right party, or who's talking about progressive and rights and who's talking about elites and stuff like that. It all sounds the same. So it makes sense for people to have the same lack of trust they have on the ruling government, to that be applying to us as well. So it's like, not everybody like us is interested in this topic. Not everybody people like enjoy their time. They're not into politics as we are. So it's like, how do we stand up from the group? The second finding that I found is the names that we use to talk about the political parties system. And I found that we basically use this us versus them. But what this does is reinforce hierarchy, especially because of the terminology we use to talk about the big parties, majority parties, traditional parties. And then we talk about ourselves as like the small party, minority, alternative party, which makes the question like, if we are good because we're small, if we're different because we're small, what happens if we grow? And we also are reinforcing that maybe they earn their hierarchy in the system because they're big and they are the historic parties. Because the political system is divided in a way that if you get a lot of votes in the last election, then you get more resources and more space to do campaigning for the next 4 years. So it's almost like a cycle. Like you need to win more votes to get more support, but then you need more support to get more votes, and it's like, oh, it's very hard to get out of the two big parties. So my recommendation is that we start talking about identity instead of sizes. For example, to talk about them about like power grab parties, monopolistic parties, and corrupt parties. And you're gonna see later why these are the characteristics that define these parties. And then to talk about us, not in terms of size, but about what is the quality behind the work we do. And I came with two terminologies that are citizens party and grassroots parties, which is like we are people getting into politics for us, not politicians making politics for politicians. The third finding has to do with the feelings we talk about. From where are we communicating when we talk about politics? We often talk about politics as a battlefield. And what this does is like it stirs anger, what makes people feel paralyzed and hopeless. Even us as progressive communicators have felt that do the state of the world. Like it's so insane everywhere that obviously this creates like almost like a sense of like I'm in survival mode. Using terminology as defend, electoral battle, compete, keep fighting. So I propose that we talk about politics from a place of care and love. Politics is a way to take care of one another, especially during hard times like the ones we're living now, appealing to the collective good, solidarity, and challenging individualism. We're all struggling, and there's a strength in that. Instead of trying to find a solution, each one of us, we're stronger if we do it together. And appealing to hope, solidarity, and more important, agency. Because if we talk about politics as a way of doing stuff, we have kind of choice on what is happening. Using terminology as like look after, deciding our future, nurturing, which sounds weird in English, but in Spanish it makes sense. The fourth finding is about how we talk about the system. And we talk about it almost as a ghost story. What is the system? And talking like that creates a mystery of accountability using non-agentive sentences like Anat mentioned before. But this also creates what I found is creates distrust in politics. When we keep framing problems as the system is like, how do we even tackle that? It seems like things are supposed to be that way because that's the system. Using terminology as like the political system is, or there are no limits or regulation. Here there were sentences talking about how the political system is established in the Dominican Republic. And we should move to a narrative to talk about who did what. For example, the system, that's what I was talking about when I was explaining to you the power grab and the corruption. The system is made by Congress. They do the laws. And then those laws rules how people participate in politics. So that's basically what the system is. People choosing things. People deciding how things work. So a way of talking about that is like read the rules. They decided, they did. That way also reflects like what can be the alternative. Then if people made these choices, we as well can make better choices. I found this problem as well when we as progressive sector, not only in the political parties, but also in NGOs and other social organizations talk about data and national statistics. We talk about it from like a place of identity. For example, this is a phrase talking about the transparency on electoral money. And we say that the Dominican Republic is the most opaque country in the Latin America when it comes to like how politicians say where their money comes from, right? It almost sounds like it is who we are, and there's no changing that. And that I saw that across all kind of data, teenage pregnancy, poverty, inequality. So we should start talking about accountability. This national statistic is not out of luck. It's not because we have bad luck or like we're meant to be like that. It's because people are doing stuff. So these new narratives I'm proposing that we talk about what they're choosing to do. They basically did the laws, so the financial stuff is hidden. And my last finding is how we talk about political participation, and we often talk about it from a place of sacrifice. It seems like we're doing this, but it's not even fun. Like, why would I even bother to join you guys if you keep talking about how hard this is and how much sacrifice and breaking the system it takes, right? So using sentences like the journey is hard, this is going to take a lot of work and sacrifice, seems impossible that independent candidate wins, yada yada. So I'm proposing that we talk from a place about hope in belonging, and we approach like the challenges of the system from a place of curiosity and adventure. For example, using sentences like, when we come together nothing can stop us. Politics are wonderful because they're a way of achieving collective prosperity. What we're building is exciting. Um, Also, I found that within Dominican culture, and I think it's the same for other Latin American or countries from the global south, there is greatness, cultural greatness in coming from below. And it almost shows like how bad you want your dreams to be true. It shows that your motivations are genuine. So we should take advantage of that cultural um, reference and talk about ourselves from that perspective. Also, it will be helpful to talk about political action as a way of identity instead of action. For example, this is a very successful campaign we had in 2020. We needed electoral, um, it's like people that sit in the tables during the election and they supervise that the process is being done transparent. That sounds extremely boring. So we came with a terminology back then to talk about guardians of democracy. And doing this research, I realized that one of the reasons this campaign was so popular is because it talked about identity instead of action. Like, nobody wants to go sit there and make sure elections are transparent. It's like, oh, you are gardening democracy. So that's a successful case that we should use for other campaigns, talking about identity and pride and belonging. So what's next? What has been happening after the messaging program and what we're still doing? The first thing is that because I research a topic that is very structural to everything we do, I've been implementing it from our day-to-day communications, from like social media posting to press releases. And I can say that I've seen a increase in support and in engagement in social media. Not only we have had content that has gone more viral, but we have also gotten agreement with the ideas we're sharing from across different spectrums from the Dominican society. Like, not only the progressive sector that always support us, but we have seen an increase on communicators, radio commentators, and politicians from other parties supporting our proposals that would have disagreed before. Also, we have seen an increase on people coming to activities. Recently, we did a big campaign on building what we call nucleos, like small groups within the territory that became like a community. And we had a lot of people joining us as well as at a protest. And it was very interesting because protesting is usually comes from anger, and it was because of a corruption case. But the feeling that was in the protest because of the messaging we did was from a place of like, oh, we have the power to change this, and very hopeful. So that's what we have done until now. And what we're doing next, we're doing some workshop with politicians and party volunteers. We have elections in 2028. So this year in 2026, we're starting to build like voluntary groups and like what politicians can be candidates for the 2028 election. So we're doing some workshops with that. We're launching a manifesto on April, and we're applying like this methodology to make the messaging more appealing and more interesting for most people. And we're also doing some focus groups to do some messaging testing. We were already doing that this year, but then the program gave us like skills to integrate the messaging testing into these focus groups and using this new methodology. So that's it.
Yay! Un placer verlo otra vez. And also a fun little cameo in that last slide of Nicole, who did the course previously in 2022. So fun little callback. Thank you, Valerie. And now to round us out, the fourth, Pamela. Pamela, are you going to come on camera for us, or we don't get to see you? It's very dark. We are coming back to the African continent to talk about not just language but film, because Pamela is a award-winning filmmaker and is going to share with us the work that she did analyzing discourse around actually her own film and reactions to it. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, thanks, Annette. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Hello?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay.
You sound good.
Yeah. I can hear you now. Okay, awesome. All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Pamela. I am a filmmaker, and I also campaign for the rights of LGBTQI people in Nigeria using storytelling. So I was also part of the GMP cohort for 2025. And yeah, so my research project was really to research how, value-based storytelling, what's how how that can shift narratives about LGBTQI rights in Nigeria. And so for that, I did a comparative analysis of the anti-rights messaging, the end homo film called Ife. So just to give you a little bit of context, right? So the situation in Nigeria is such that the anti-rights movement has sort of gained traction across Africa, and obviously funded by evangelicals from the West. They have all kinds of conferences, and they've been pushing a lot with our lawmakers to pass legislation, right? So the
I think, Pamela, deactivate your video. It's the video the problem.
Yeah, Pamela, you're not coming through cleanly. Maybe turn off your video to save bandwidth.
Pretty much says you can go now frame being queer as illegal or as Western or as dangerous is something that's immoral. And then the public turns to churches, to politicians, and gossip groups for what they call the truth. And then also, it's not just Nigeria alone. There's also Uganda, who that passed the 2023 anti-homosexuality law, which pretty much gives life imprisonment for same-sex intimacy. And then you also have the same thing in Ghana, where they're actually discussing a new law now, that's supposed to increase the penalty for being queer, or promoting queer ideology, and all of that stuff. So that's the context in which this research was being done, to see, okay, how is the right how the anti-rights movements framing their messaging, how are we framing it in Nigeria, and what can we do better. So yeah, okay, so you already moved to the next slide. Okay. So why does value-based messaging matter now? Why is it important? Because people don't change their beliefs, through facts alone, right? People change their beliefs, or base their beliefs on safety, belonging, family, fairness, dignity, etc. And so what I found was, across Nigeria, Uganda, and Ghana, the messaging from the anti-rights groups were things like, they used war metaphors, like, an attack on culture, an invasion, them wanting to defend our children. And they also use things like purity metaphors, saying that, you hear things like, oh, queerness is all African, it's a contamination, it's unnatural, things like that. And so you can imagine messages being framed using those types of metaphors, with the fact that you have rising authoritarianism in many parts of Africa, including Nigeria, as far as I'm concerned. You have a situation where, more and more African countries are legislating more anti-rights laws. You have the global evangelical influence, and and then you also have people that are like actively being recruited into this anti-rights movements by the day. Um, and so anyway, I don't want to talk about the theoretical framework because that's boring for now. Um, but okay, so let me just go over like some of the things that I encountered with the anti-rights messaging. Like as I mentioned, they use common metaphors like war, purity, um, and things like that. Fear, protection, nationalism. And I got some of this from places like the FamilyWatch.org, the International Coalition Against Gender Ideology, the National Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights and Family Values. So some of those types of groups. Okay, so let me then move over and talk about the End Homophobia campaign. So just to give you a little bit of background, so what sparked the campaign was there was a group of men who attacked this particular guy and accused him of being gay, and they actually filmed and shared the abuse online. And so that video triggered widespread outrage amongst young Nigerians and LGBT rights activists. And so many expressed, growing frustration with unchecked violence, police inaction, safety, and things like that. So that's what gave birth to the End Homophobia campaign in Nigeria. And it was really a hashtag that was used across social media to and it showed a rising generation that was willing to challenge homophobia, to reject violence, and to push for a narrative shift towards belonging, humanity, and dignity. So that's some of the things that I saw when I analyzed the messaging. Was number one, one of the strengths is it was visible, it was urgent, and there was a lot of solidarity around it. Then a weakness that I found was it was very fact heavy, so it relied a lot on statistics and numbers. It was reactive, um, and the messaging often repeated opponent frames, and it also hedged values. And so when you even like from the name itself, the End Homophobia Nigeria campaign, it activates homophobia first. So that in itself is also like a problem. And when people say things like, we're not asking for special rights, it reinforces the opponent frame of special rights, right? And when you say, not all Nigerians hate LGBTQ people, it repeats hate as a central idea to the campaign. So a better framing would have been to lead with values, so lead with things like belonging, safety, dignity, love, and all of that. And then for the sake of time, I'm just going to move to the film Ife. So Ife is a 30-minute queer romantic drama that was produced by yours truly. And it follows, two women who fall in love over a 3-day date. And what Ife does as a reframe is it uses love, family, and belonging to redefine queerness as part of African life. And it replaces metaphors of attack with care and connection, right? So why does Ife matter for this particular research? So when you see that in a country where queer identity is framed through criminalization, fear, danger, and moral panic, the film offers a counter story that's built on love, on tenderness, on humanity, and everyday normalcy. So it reframes queerness not as a crime or controversy, but as ordinary, intimate, African, relatable, and emotionally resonant. So these are some of the reactions, audience reactions, through comments on YouTube, and you can see there's a lot of themes of love, of empathy, of pride, recognition, things like that. Yeah. So here I wanted to share what the comparative analysis reveals about narrative power. And one of the things that stood out was value-based storytelling has consistently outperformed reactive messaging, right? So every time you speak from a value-based perspective, it's not reactive, it's proactive. So there's also the thing that empathy leads to recognition, and recognition leads to attitude shift. And that's really what drives people to change their perception and their beliefs. And also, when activists repeat or negate opponent frames, it actually makes it more dominant. So we want to stay away from that. And we also found that films provide the safest emotional pathway for narrative change. And that also narrative change is possible under criminalization. So where do we go from here, and how do we go about rethinking how we drive messaging through filmmaking? So the first thing is we center values, not frames. So we did with things like belonging, safety, family, freedom, and we stop repeating or negating opponent narratives, using words like un-African, special rights, things like that. And that grounds the messaging in what people care about, not what they fear. So we also want to continue to tell human stories using narrative and emotion to create recognition and to help people to be able to identify and to see themselves in the stories that we tell. And we want to shift from ending homophobia to everyone deserves to belong. So something like that. We also want to let lived experiences lead the way instead of statistics, because those carry, when you focus on lived experiences, it carries more emotional weight. And the last thing is to hedge evidence, not our values. So be precise in our claims instead of saying, oops, sorry, electricity went out, I think. Sorry. Anyway, by being unwavering with human worth, right? So using words like every Nigerian deserves safety, deserves belonging, and things like that. And we found that this would build trust, especially with people in the middle, who I like to call the movable middle. And so the thing here is to invest in storytellers, not just statements, to build campaigns around love, care, community, and not just injustice, to use values that resonate culturally, um, things like family, solidarity, joy, courage, resilience, things like that, and to create consistency in the messaging across the continent. So as a filmmaker, what I'm going to keep doing is I'm going to keep making films that center African queer joy, not just queer suffering, and to use films to humanize and to soften and to try to shift narratives and beliefs about queerness in Africa. And the other thing too is I'll try to build characters who are reflective of the emotional truths and who also embody themes of love, tenderness, courage, and things like that. So yeah, so the whole plan is to combine filmmaking with value-based communication to see how we can try to change hearts and minds towards acceptance and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If everyone can come back, we have just 10 minutes for questions. So, questions in the chat. Brett, do you have a question? Oh, you're moderating Q&A. Yay, not me. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to. And I actually, if I might jump in with a question for Ntuthuzo and Pamela, the one thing that I always wonder about is this framing of traditional family or traditional values. And it seems like often people repeat that as if like traditional families are the kind of ones that the right talks about, which is like one man, one woman, and 2.5 kids. Whereas many people have very varied and traditions around families. But I was just wondering if that's something you've looked at and if this idea of tradition is something worth reclaiming or best stayed away from.
I can go
I don't
first.
think I got the question, Brett. I'm sorry.
It was around how the right kind of uses this word of traditional values in being against kind of sexual identity or gender identity and so on. And I'm wondering if this idea of reclaiming the concept tradition is worth doing, or if the idea of tradition is best kind of avoided.
Yeah, I think it needs to be avoided. Daniela, who's part of this, session, did a beautiful presentation about, chosen family, which is a concept that has always existed. And this idea of traditional family within the African context is something which is quite foreign in the sense that there is a long line of single mothers, single fathers, grandmothers that have raised kids. Also same-sex couples that have raised kids, not only now, but throughout our history that has been reflected. Two women in Lesotho, when the husband dies, they become a couple and they start raising kids by themselves. So we would be basically playing onto what the opposition wants us to say if we also continue and actually write this bus of traditional family.
Thank you. Were there any, yeah, I'd love to open it up if there are questions from folks, if you could just raise your hand.
I can chime in on that question that you asked. What I would say is that what Ntuthuzo is proposing is, in essence, a reframing of traditional with the word Africanism in a positive way, rather than having a battle over a word, traditional, which I totally agree is kind of lost to us. There are certain words we just can't give up. We can't give up love. We can't give up family in many cultural contexts, not all of them. We can't give up freedom. But then there are other words that are just so kind of right wing and they really don't have a progressive corollary. So we don't want to be in a battle over words that don't really serve us. We do want to be a battle over ideas and values and concepts that we require. And I think his brilliant idea is that Africanism, the reclamation of that and the definition of that in positive terms is like taking the place of whatever traditional is doing for people.
Right. Super interesting. Anyone else have questions for the folks or comments? Well, maybe I can jump in on another one then. But I was wondering if anyone, I guess, what did folks find most difficult? I know, Anat, initially you talked about the metaphor part as being the one people find challenging, but I was wondering about, what was kind of, I guess, what was the most difficult or the most, kind of, useful switch that you made from doing this course, either or, difficult. It might have been difficult at first, but then useful. But I was just wondering what was kind of, I guess, yeah, like an aha moment or something that really was pivotal for you in this course.
If I can I go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I think what was very surprising for me is how much we stay in the opposition frames when we respond to some of the things that they say, and we see that we keep repeating the same things over and over and over again, and it's like, it was just very alarming to see that it was done so many times, and until I got to that program, like I wasn't really aware of how bad it was. And like now I literally see copies and I'm like, oh, there's a problem. Oh, there's a problem. Oh, don't say that. Oh, don't say that. So it's like it was very eye-opening for me. And for me, I think that was the biggest takeaway, was to kind of not be reactive to what the anti-rights are saying, but to sort of stay away from their messaging and make it about what the kind of future that you want to see on the continent and the kind of lives that we want to live as queer people. And I think for me that was the most powerful thing.
Thank you. And Valerie.
Well, for me, I think it was connecting the discovery with the action. Because realizing and seeing the mistakes is one thing, but then being able to implement in a different way takes a lot of awareness and being very present and connected with all the content that we learn when we are trying to write new messages. But I also discovered that it's a skill that you develop, that the more you use, the more you get used to talking that way, even though it doesn't come natural at the beginning, because we are like so used to this way of speaking. So I think that was the most challenging, applying that.
Yeah. Thanks. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yes, I would say like the aha was mainly in seeing there was no much difference between how our field talks about the thing and how the opposition talks about it. Like we use very similar language, though we think so differently. And the the passive voice used is like there are no responsibles anywhere. So it's always an index, and it's also like a thing that's happening, never someone doing something too. like this person.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing your insights and what you've learned. And there's a lot of great comments as well that people have shared about how useful this session was. So I really want to thank everyone for coming on and sharing that. Anat, maybe I want to turn over to you before we end. We have a couple of minutes, just kind of what comes next. What is next for this program? If are you having it again? How could people, do it if they're the next time and so on?
Well, I told you at the beginning that my line is that I'm never doing it again. But if we do it again, then what will happen is we will circulate and try to promote and push. I mean, it's funny, you should have asked Jay. Jay will tell you exactly when it's happening again because Jay is the actual like maker of it happening, and Jay has a different opinion than I do. And then it just ends up happening in the passive voice in this way. So we try to do our best to really push out the application as much as possible. My guess is that it will be a 2027, not a 2026. We tend to do it in odd years, not always, but has to do with our own US electoral cycle. That's why it ends up in odd years. And yeah, we will push it out as hard as we can. If you registered for this, we have your information, so we'll make sure that you get it. We ask other people to share it. Yeah, and I think, what's next is we now have three cohorts. We are trying to see if we can match people, get them connected, because a lot of people do have overlap. They're working on similar things in different places, and they can definitely support each other and benefit from each other. We already have a lot of that going on. We have a very lively set of WhatsApp groups for each of our cohorts, and people really, I mean, I don't know, I feel like people really help each other, get resources from each other, fix each other's things. Yeah, but to be announced. And thank you, Brett and Iris and everybody in your community for making it possible to make the course really so much richer and better by having a broader array of folks participate. That was a huge, huge endeavor for us and something that's really important to us. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining and hopefully continue the conversation and continue to learn from one another. So appreciate it.